Do you need me to repeat? When do you end your day?
Like 5 o'clock. You know, my wife's busy too. You know, we've been busy getting our last child out of the nest. So, I mean, I'm at the greatest time of my life. My kids all are getting paid. You know, they have paying jobs, right? I can do pretty much what I want now. And I really believe that, a friend of mine told me the other day, they said, look, Bob, look at it as if you're 25 and you want to build another business by the time you're 35. Well, that's 10 years. Well, that's a lot of time. I mean, we built a company literally from $2 million to $500 million a year in 5 years. So I know it can be done. So yeah, you want to do it again. It's the greatest feeling in the world. And it's not about the money part, it's about the trophy.
Every day counts. Every day counts.
Every day counts, all right. So I try to get up every morning and make every day count. That's right.
Any other question? Here, Bob.
You talked about journaling, and I've read so much about that, and most millionaires, they say, do journal. I've tried several times and failed. So what would be your best advice to continue? Because I've done it as much as 6 months, and then
stop failing. What I mean is there isn't any easy solution to that. You just have to get into a routine of doing it and be forgiving to yourself. Let's say you missed a day or two. Well, don't slap yourself on the back and say, oh, gee, I can't do it. Just keep at it. And I believe if you keep at it and keep at it, maybe talk to somebody about it, you know, or journal and send a journal to somebody. So somebody else on the other end is looking at it. I have like 12 blogs. The blogs are very helpful. I don't know how many people read the blogs. Don't care. But I got a couple people that read them, and they'll always send back, and they'll say, oh, loved your blog, loved your blog. Well, what does that do to me? Makes me get up the next morning and write some more.
Okay, we have a question over here. All right, and then we'll get to you. Yes, sir.
Well, Bob, this is some great information and some great takeaways for me. But I want to know, what are you most passionate about, what you're doing right now, and where do you see yourself going or doing in the next 5 years?
Not the 5-year question. Never ask Bob Sherwood the 5-year question. But anyway, he will answer.
2 years.
Okay. Bob, it's a good question.
Mobile apps. Okay. Mobile apps of all kinds. So I just finished one that's actually released now. It's up on iTunes. And we're looking at 3 or 4 more. And the reason is because, A, they're fun. They're fun to do. You have to have the right team of people to get them done. I'm really good at user interface testing, because I can dumb it down and then either it works for me or it doesn't. So I do a lot of user interface testing. I did a fantastic job for Wells Fargo, by the way, one time that I wish I had Dan to give me time to tell you about. But anyway, user interface testing, mobile apps are important because I think behavior is the key. In all the patent work I've done in advertising, I'm probably one of the top 10 highest paid expert witnesses in the area of internet advertising in the United States. And so I get called in almost every major case where internet advertising is an issue. I mean, I've done so much internet advertising patents for Google, I can't work on any case adverse to Google because I've seen all their algorithms for search selection. So I can't even consult with a company that they might, you know, be up against, because I've actually seen how their algorithms work. So I sometimes get a big kick when I hear other people talking about how they work, you know, because I actually have seen it.
So
but anyway,
apps.
so
you know, this is
mobile apps.
So we always hear about some college kid becoming big because he created a mobile app or an app. If you have an iPhone, there is an app that Bob created. This kid here, this kid created a pinpoint, right?
Yeah, but let me be clear about this. Nobody does anything by themselves, in my opinion, right? There are drivers, and there's the engine, all these other things. So like in the mobile app, for example, I did what's called the computer architecture. Anybody in this room could become a computer architect. It's not any problem. You just have to sit down and draw up what your idea is in a step-by-step fashion. Step 1, download the app. Step 2, click on the front interface, design that screen. Everybody has ideas on apps. They're not that complicated to do at one level. Now, then maybe you get Cody, maybe his company does this, but then you go to a company that actually can do the programming, right? Once you've done what I call the architecture, which basically is lines and charts and circles, but very specific, not general, right? They're very specific. The user interface steps we did for the Pinpoint app was 24 pages long. That was just a step by step. So when we went to a programmer, they would know what we wanted to have programmed. Okay, so mobile apps are my passion now of all kinds. And also, I'd say the general area of any business that's becoming disintermediated, like banks. I mean, I like to sit and think about what a bank will look like in 5 years. It's a very, very fascinating subject. What will they look like? Because they don't look like what they did 10 years ago. The brick is slowly going. I have a friend of mine who started an internet bank in New York City. In the first 3 weeks, they got $40 million of deposits. Yeah,
So
and they have very little overhead.
Just to highlight that Pinpoint app, if you have an iPhone, you can go into the store and get that, and it will tell you if you're going to Chicago or you're going somewhere in the country, all your contacts that you have on your iPhone will appear on a map on the screen. So if you're flying into LA and you aren't even thinking about, oh man, my old friend Jimmy Jones or Betty Smith, you just look on your map, you pinpoint, and it will tell you, hey, I should reach out to him.
I don't want to correct you, but there are some limitations that's created by Apple's system. So there are limitations to how many of these pins you can actually place on a map. But see, that's the fun. The fun of doing it is actually learning how to do it and then working with a team of people to get it done. That really is the fun. I mean, that's the excitement, right? Is a team that's putting it together, the collaboration, right? You know, and maybe you make money or maybe you don't, but you don't make any if you don't try. I guarantee you that.
That's right. Okay, did you still have a question?
So I love your attitude on success and failure. I think it's a phenomenal attitude. How would you support, if you will, younger generations that have a dream and the dream is shattered because they think they failed in what they're doing? What would you suggest for support, or how would you reach out to those people?
What's your name?
Mary.
Mary. Okay, Mary. The first thing that I do, and I haven't raised 5 sons, I have some direct experience in this, but I think the whole attitude is to show them that failure is okay. And I can tell you that culturally that's different depending where you're in the country. So we have to basically preach, almost lecture, that failure is basically okay. I mean, there's really nothing new about failing. I mean, Abraham Lincoln ran for 6 different offices, failed every time, and then became president, right? So there you go, right? We may have another example coming up, currently. But so failure, I love failure. I mean, what is the problem with that? And I give you this quick story. I taught a graduate course at the MBA program at KU, and I gave this example about failure. I said, look, I have 4 friends of mine that started a business in California. They raised $50 million. They spent every cent. In 2 years, they failed. They went bankrupt, right? Guess what? 2 years later, they raised another $50 million from the same investors. And this time, they made it. Now, so the thing about failure is that if you haven't lost trust, people that invest in your business, unless they're absolutely stupid, it's an investment. They might lose it. That's what it's called, an investment. So if you've been, what I say, if you haven't cheated anybody or defrauded anybody, if failure is simply the experience, then you've benefited. You usually, well, I always say, go back to the people if you had a team of people and kind of work with them, but make sure you never lose trust. I mean, I know in the venture capital business, the absolute sin is to cheat, fraud, and lie. You know, Gene Kleiner was on board for I don't know how many years, and I'd go to him and I'd say, Gene, I got this problem, that problem. And he'd say, well, what are so unique about those problems? He said, you know, I got to lay off 25 people. Well, okay, that's what you have to do. In other words, I was failing at certain points in that life frame, but, you know, he never ever said failure was bad. He just said, oh, well, that's part of business. So I think, and I've had my sons go through it. You can't shorten what I call the stand-up time. The stand-up time is they're down on the floor. Some of them take 6 months to stand up. Some of them stand up the next day. So you can't shorten the stand-up time because that's, I think, inbred. They're either stand up quick or they don't. But most of them will stand up. So anyway, that's how I dealt with it. I preach failure to my kids. Get out there and fail.
That's powerful because that's what kids need to hear today. Everybody gets a trophy for participation, but well, we should have a trophy for failure. So, hey, let's talk about this. Okay, let's get big. You work and coach and consult and work with a lot of companies. If you could describe it as when someone approaches you, a young man in the corner over there in the doorway Let's say a Luke Mattis. Young man comes to you with an idea or a vision or a dream or a company product idea. Do you have like some glasses or some do you like that you look through, or how do you see, what do you look for, or what are the attributes of a successful entrepreneur, what you would coach him in?
There's about 3 parts to that. So the first part is I have what I developed, a 25-page questionnaire. So if you really have time to sit down with me, I'm going to ask you all these questions if you want to work with me. Again, the reason is because if I'm going to give you my time, irrespective of what you're going to pay me, forget that. If I'm going to give you my time, I want to know you're going to show up, because I know I'm going to show up if I start giving you my time, right? So I have a 25-page questionnaire that I ask a lot of questions about, but they deal with areas of leadership. They deal with what I used to call passion, and commitment, and are you inspirational? When I look for people in, can they inspire other people? Can they inspire other people to do things? Are they committed to what they believe in, right? Do they have a passion for it? I mean, you can talk to somebody in 5 minutes, and you can tell if they have a passion for what they're doing. And Tom Perkins, who's probably the wealthiest guy that I know, and Perkins always told me, he said, keep selling. But he said it in another way. You can't keep selling something that you're not passionate about. And he didn't mean keep taking advantage of people. He said, if you're really passionate about it, go about doing it. Go about doing it. So in answer to your question, I look for people that are passionate about what they're doing, right? And that's got to be apparent in the first 60 seconds. If it's not, there's a problem there. And then the second thing is, can they inspire other people to follow them? Because they're going to have to do that, right? Perkins used to say the best time to start a company is when you're 35 years old. And the reason he said is because at 35, you inspire the people in their 20s. They want to be like you. You're a hotshot 25-year-old driving a Porsche. And the older people, they want to feel they were young again. So he said, you can attract money from both sides, right? He said the young people come in. So yeah, inspire people and then committed. I mean, you always know commitment. There's all kinds of jokes about commitment, but commitment is really easy. Somebody comes in my door, they want to do this or the other, and I say, I may filter them with some meeting or some time to call me back. But you can tell commitment because they got to do something else, or they got to go to a soccer game. Now, I've gone to 200 soccer games, but I can tell you this: when I was raising money, I wasn't going, because there's no way you can do both. I do not believe in this great balance of life you hear people talk about. I think you can create a great lifestyle business for yourself. I would be what you would call a lifestyle entrepreneur right now. That's what I would call myself, right? And that's wonderful, right? But I would not want anybody to invest in me to build a business, because I'm not interested in that level of commitment anymore. But some people are. Yeah. And I believe it takes that. It takes unbelievable, undying, persistence, commitment. Yes, you have to be willing to give up a lot of things. I've met with, dozens and dozens of guys and women starting companies, and sometimes I've had meetings with their wives or spouses. I say, I want to get all your people together. I want to make sure that your spouse knows that now you were making $100,000, now you're going to make 30. That you're going to work for this 3 years, and there's a high probability you'll come out with zero, nothing, right? Now, are you going to get divorced, or what's going to happen to you? And if you can't handle that, I don't mean you, I mean both sides. Whether it's a woman business or a man business, both sides. Life changes if you're building a business. Doesn't have to change in a lifestyle company, but it definitely changes if you're building a business. It's just not the same.
As a segue into our next topic, because we're winding down here and wrapping up the concept of coaching, how about in here, in your first, say, 21 years of life, who had a coach in athletics or band or whatever? Raise your hand if you had somebody in your life that really was a coach that you remember. I remember my high school basketball coach. He told me if I ever got out of low gear, I'd really be a great basketball player. And he said that at small town David City, Nebraska, at the annual sports banquet in front of 500 plus people, including my mom and dad. Well, guess what? The next 2 years, I got out of low gear because I was so mad at him. But he changed my life. Coaching. Part of ACA and this Executive Summit is there's the benefit of coaching. Bob Young over here does a lot of that.
I say everybody needs a boss. Even if you're the boss, you need a boss. Maybe it's a board of directors, but you need a coach. And I've done a lot of coaching. I still do it today. I did it last week, right? 2 examples of that. Overland Park fella, who is a very, very smart guy, goes to California, writes 7 patents, or he gets files and gets issued 7 patents. and he was having trouble with licenses, talking to Walt Disney on the phone as one of the licensors. So I went out and started working with him, and what we did in coaching, he'd get on the phone to his contact at Walt Disney, and I'd get on the other phone. I'd listen. He'd da-da-da-da-da, right? Then he'd hang up, and I'd say, okay, here's the feedback, right? You could have asked this question, you could have asked this question. You let him get by with that answer. You could have like explored that. Here were some things you could have added. So coaching can take on, here's what I think you should have done, but if they're in a real life environment, that's what I'm really suggesting. That the best coaching is done in a real life environment. For example, he had trouble closing deals. This is a real smart kid, by the way. And he had trouble closing deals. So we'd go into Walt Disney or Mattel, and we'd try to close toy deals. He built electronic toys. And he wasn't good at that. So I'd go with him, and I'd show him how to close the deal. Okay, well, here's the contract. Will you sign it? Because we got to get out of here, right? And he wasn't really good at that, but he came very good at it. So this is kind of like the kernel of the story. So one day he calls me and he said, Bob, I've got a guy who wants to buy all my patents. So the guy's in New York City. He's a venture capital firm. He said, I want nothing less than $7 million. I won't take one penny less. If you help me, I'll give you $500,000 if we close the deal. So 3 months I worked real hard. By this time, he's really good at closing the deal, right? And so we did close. But the point is that coaching kind of helped him to set a standard for what he was trying to do, right? And I remember in kind of like final negotiations, we were negotiating a 5-year employment contract with him, a derivative product contract with him for other products that he might develop, because the guy's brain went a mile a minute. And they were trying to offer him $6 million. And he'd say no. And I was on the phone, and they'd call me, and they'd say, what about 6.5? No, he wouldn't take a penny less than $7 million. And he got it. So it kind of tells me, about commitment and persistence and diligence and coaching. The last coaching example, because I'm a firm believer in it, was I have a firm that I've been working with for a long time, small company, could be, I think, a very nice sized company. They do customized computer programs. Their main client is Marriott. They do $1 million a year with Marriott. If you use the mobile app Marriott, where you go and sign up and book in advance, that kind of thing, they do all that. They even host it. They have their own servers, host for Marriott. Okay, but this guy's an unbelievably great programmer, could not collect money from Marriott. Marriott bills just go on and on and on and on. So I said, look, let me coach you on your accounts receivables. This is kind of like the detail that I'm at some days. And by the way, I firmly believe that the devil is in the headlines, but God is in the details. So that's where I live. I live down the details. So I said, let's first, get all your invoices together, and then let's call Marriott, and let's get in their accounts payable department. And so it took us about, I'm going to say 20 phone calls with him on the phone and me on the phone, kind of explain to him that the person that says they can't pay you, or the person that says the check is in the mail, you have to go one more level. Now, he had some big checks. I mean, they're owing like $100,000 at a pop. So if they're 30 days late, his wife is giving him a hard time, So, but we work through that. So that to me is really the way to coach. It's coaching what I call a real life environment, as opposed to, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but when I coach, I don't like to go out to lunch with somebody and talk about what we're going to do. I like to pick out something like, let's learn how to collect money. Let's learn how to talk to a bank. Let's learn how to really work a cash flow. To me, cash flow is king. Start out with that. So that's coaching. To me, it's everything. I've been lucky. I've had the greatest coaches and mentors in the world.
And each of us in this room have been involved with the coaching that ACA at some level has helped, and that's why we're here. I was with a group, and Michael Jordan was talking about what? Yeah, the greatest basketball player of all time. LeBron was trying to get there. But he said he has a shooting coach, a dribbling coach, he has an apparel, a clothing coach, he has a media coach. Michael Jordan has 7 different coaches for different things in his life. And we're all here, and what Bob talked about in the coaching that Bob does and other people do here for the organization, the value of that. Don't be afraid to ask someone. And what we've done with you here today, Bob, was ask you questions, and there will be kernels, there will be nuggets that we will all take away and say, wow, I know you're not going to be able to look at your computer screen without thinking of Bob, or log on to Wi-Fi or check Google, because that's what I'm telling them, that they're going to be thinking about you, which is a good thing. But You've been a part of this. Any final questions here? Because we're winding down. Any one or two questions? You know, we don't want any elephant in the room questions. Yes, sir.
First of all, Bob, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. My question is, when you have an organization, because I truly believe that the pulse of the organization really is the dynamics. If you have it rolling, everything's rolling, and then it starts to go sour. How do you fix that culture?
Well, I don't know there is any blanket answer to that, but usually it has to be disruptive. That would be my first thought, right? Is that you won't do it in some sort of linear suggestion. Disruptive means basically tearing down what's on the walls and rebuilding them, whatever that might be. But the first thing I would probably think about doing is asking the management, what culture do they really want? I mean, that's really where it starts. It's like, what culture do you want? At Rastrops, we had people that came to work there that I have to make them go home at night. They wouldn't go home. They would just stay there, you know, work through the night. Some of them never wore shoes, but they got the work done. So, but we wanted that kind of culture. So I think it starts with the management, whether that's 3 people or 4 people or even 1 person, deciding what is the culture that we want. And that has to be inspirational in itself. One final comment on that is it's like, you may have heard the old Notre Dame story. You heard that story? What's your name, by the way? Reg, okay. The Notre Dame story is just 2 guys that are bricklayers. Then Notre Dame took 400 years to build Notre Dame, by the way. There are 2 bricklayers, and there's 4 pylons in Notre Dame that build up the structure. So there's 1 bricklayer and 1 pylon, and a bricklayer, another pylon. A guy's looking for a job, goes to the first bricklayer and says, what are you doing? The guy says, well, I take this brick, gonna lay it on that brick, gonna take this brick, and my sons will do it, and those sons will do it. We'll be laying bricks here for another 250 years, because it's gonna take a long time to build this church. So the guy looking for a job goes to the second bricklayer, and he says, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm building a monument to the Lord. It's going to be around for thousands of years, and people are going to come from all over the world to see it. So you know who he went to work for, right? So I think that bricklayer, the second guy, decided what his culture was. He was not going to be just a bricklayer. So I think, I think you start with what culture do you want, and then what does it take to rebuild that culture? I don't think it's easy, by the way.
Yeah. You know, and the culture around this room, as Martin has shared, is really a culture of encouraging one another, and that's a powerful first step for all of us. Any other questions here? We're winding down. Any final questions? We're getting ready to wrap up. Yes.
So where's a good place to go to look for investors in particular certain companies, and how does one get an appointment with you?
Well, what's your name? Karen. K-A-R-E-N, Karen? I think in terms of looking for investors, I have people that ask me that question. Where do you look? And my feeling is at first you have to make a list of your friends. This is going to sound silly, but if your friends won't invest in you, by the way, it's a good chance maybe somebody else won't, because your friends know you. So you have to start with a list of people. And you may want to start a year ahead of when you need the money. The worst time is when you actually need the money. It's like going to a bank for a loan. Oh, you need the money? We won't make it. You don't need the money? We'll give you all the money you want. So in investments like that, here's what I used to tell people, and here's what I know people did. People that I knew that were going to know they need the money carried in their pocketbook a list of 10 people, 10 important people. For example, you might carry my name. You now know me, right? But you won't call me today and ask me for money, because I wouldn't invest. But what you would do over time is get to know me, and you would tell me what you're planning on doing. Then you would come to me later and say, you know, Bob, I told you I was going to do this, and now I did it. Then you'd tell me something else you're going to do. It might take you a year, but you'd bring all these people along. And then you would say at some point, I want to raise money. Because see, what people invest in is trust. And so you have to go to that. Now, will a great business plan raise money? Maybe. I mean, I'm not a big business plan believer. I mean, Hotmail raised $300 million on one-page business plan, right? So it's not so much the business plan. I taught business plans, by the way, at KU, and I taught them at Stanford for a semester. So I know about the importance of business plans, but they're becoming less and less important because the future is a little bit hard to forecast. So I think you start with your friends. You start with maybe people like Cody. But in my experience is that you want to start with the idea that you need the money 6 months or a year from now. You just can't start with the idea today's Monday, can I raise it in 30 days? If you get it, it's going to be the wrong kind of money. There'll be so many strings on it you can't do anything.